startup costs, and they'll get 3 months' salary. This offer applies to most full and part-timers, including warehouse workers. Amazon will not predict how many employees will take the deal. Ken Duffy, Fox News.
And gas prices are declining slowly but steadily across the country, pushing the national average down 3 cents on the week to $2.86. Today's average is 4 cents cheaper than last month and the same price as 1 year ago. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
J. Warner Wallace.
I think we're blessed as Christians that we don't believe something that's not rooted in history. We believe something that had to actually occur. As Paul said, if the resurrection didn't actually occur in history, we're to be pitied. And that's the beautiful thing about Christianity, is it's something you can actually investigate. I'm grateful for that, because as an investigator, that's exactly how I came to faith.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
This April saw the highest number of apprehensions made in a single month in 12 years. There were more than 98,000 immigrants apprehended in April trying to cross the border illegally. That's up 159% compared to April of last year, when 38,000 immigrants were apprehended.
What we have to do is remove those loopholes. We have to allow people to be detained, keep the family together, but keep them there and adjudicate that case quickly. So we need resources to do that.
We're going to stop Central American applications being made at the border because we don't have enough judges for hearing dates. We're going to go to 100 days. We can hold minor children for 100 days so that we can actually process the entire family without letting them go. We're going to increase judges by 500.
We have a crisis at the border, a national emergency declared by the president. The commander-in-chief has given me a direct legal order to secure the border. I'm securing the border.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hey. Welcome to the program today. I'm Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, and we have so much show for you today. So much show. What I'm excited about is that we are going to be chatting with Marc about this whole bar situation. It's still a situation. It's still going on. So we'll get updates from him straight from Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. He was a former spokesperson for Vice President Pence, and he's now an RNC spokesperson, and he's going to be joining us, and it's going to be fantastic. We're also going to be ripping and running through a number of topics, namely that voter fraud convictions have piled up across the nation. And this is something that we're told often, especially me with the permanent tan, that we just don't have voter fraud. And so there's no reason to have voter ID. There's no reason for us to ever do anything about it. We shouldn't even talk about it. We shouldn't mention it. We shouldn't even act as if it's possible. We shouldn't even discuss it. It's not something that can be discussed. Well, we know that's not true, right? We know that's not true. So what we're going to do is unpack a bunch of these different stories, and then we're going to wade into immigration. And one of the things about the immigration crisis that is going undiscussed are the details surrounding what these people do once they get into the country. They're breaking out of these, kind of plastic tent detention centers. They're just basically, they get tired of being corralled in there, 500 to a tent. So they just decide we're leaving. They join hands and they leave, and they just come out into America. The same way you decide when you're sitting in a waiting room for too long that you've decided I'm canceling my own appointment, and you get up and you walk out. That's what these people are doing. They're just leaving. There's also the issue of how much wall is getting built. We'll update on that. And what's happening with the acting deputy chief on the drug seizures. There's just so much. So we'll get into all those things. We'll take your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And then we will, we have much more to get into, the election fraud, all of that. But right now I want to talk about Acts 4:13. It says, "Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated common men, they were astonished, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus." So a couple things here. First of all, we learn from this that being with Jesus can make you wise and intelligent beyond what your capacity is. In other words, if you don't have a ton of education, I'm in that boat. If you didn't graduate from college, or maybe you did, but it's not one of those prestigious named universities. And so at first glance, people think, they're not expecting to be impressed by you. But if you spend time with Jesus and the Word, if you spend time obeying what God has called us to do and not to do, you spend time fellowshipping with other believers during the week and Bible study and going into the church house on Saturday or Sunday, whichever day is your chosen day, you're going to be wise beyond not just your years, but what you should be able to know based on your education. And this is something that I see it often. Young people with an amazing clarity about issues they can unpack, they can listen, they can analyze. Then you talk to them a little bit and you find out, they're solid believers, not on the milk anymore. They've moved on to the meat. That's what we can learn from this. Also, spending time with Jesus gives us boldness. We become bold when we become emboldened. When we spend time in the scriptures and we know that we've figured out the reason behind our faith, that we know we can explain it to others, that brings a boldness that stretches out beyond what our natural person should be able to do. You've heard people say it, she speaks with boldness. She's wise beyond her years. He is a sage. Or they'll say, he's been here before. Or that young man, it's like an 80-year-old man trapped in a teenager's body. That comes, it's God-given. It's gifted. When we say, you know what, I'm going to put aside my television show or my phone or my devices, or I'm going to put aside, playing a sport or doing whatever. I'm going to set some time aside, first things first, to spend time with the Father. Then you're going to have boldness. You're going to be wise beyond your years. And you're going to defy the conventional expectations of those who say, if you've got a bachelor's degree, this is what you should sound like. If you've got, a master's or a PhD, this is what you should sound like. And there's nothing wrong with education. I'm not against it. But the fact is, roughly 30% of Americans have advanced education, a college degree. 70% of us are running around and we're astonishing other people, some of us, with our wisdom because we've been spending time with Jesus. So if anything, this is the key to getting wise. If we're not, I'm beyond all the college years. Now we're working on getting the kids into this situation. So my best bet is to spend time with Jesus so he can make me wise. So it's Acts 4:13. Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated common men, they were astonished and they recognized that they had been with Jesus. Fantastic. All right. So now let's turn to the STEM shooter. So this story, it just keeps getting more and more interesting. You've got this school shooting that happened last week. And you guys will recall that this one child was shot dead, and then, a number of others were injured. And, there's now unpack the details of what exactly happened. Now, again, I'm not saying any names on here. I'm not giving anybody any additional, publicity, what have you. But this is an interesting story because we're talking about someone who shouldn't have been here. Yeah, I said it. What you gonna do? I said it. We have this father of one of the accused shooters in the attack in Colorado. He had actually been deported twice. Not once, but twice. Just goes to show you how broken the border situation is. You're deported twice. You come back in and you still are able to facilitate not you killing somebody, but your child killing somebody. So the father of one of the alleged STEM school Highlands Ranch shooters in Colorado is a serial felon, an illegal alien from Mexico. We won't even say his name. He's the father of the alleged 16-year-old killer. And he was once jailed for 15 months for domestic violence against the shooter's mom and menacing with a weapon. Now, they've killed one student and injured 8 others. And the big takeaway from this is that without a border, without a functioning immigration system, without the ability to deport someone and ensure that they don't re-enter illegally, we have no way of stopping these things from happening. And the reason that this is so egregious, in my opinion, is that this intersects directly with an issue that the Democrats have been railing about, ad nauseum and ad infinitum. They just won't let this go, and it's gun control. They're always talking about gun control. We need to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding Americans in order to prevent criminals from getting them, or kids who want to be criminals from getting them. How about if you keep the actual criminals out of the country? We have enough of our own criminals to deal with. The fact is, if you are an American citizen born here, you're not naturalized, there's really nothing we can do about the fact that you're a criminal except arrest and prosecute. And if the prosecution goes well, if you're guilty by a preponderance of the evidence as judged by a jury of your peers, then you're sent off for some kind of, rehabilitation, prison, something. But if you're here illegally, well, first off, you shouldn't be here. If you want to commit crimes, if you want to train up a kid who's going to shoot his classmates, how about you do that back in Mexico? But again, you have not just that, but this American woman, she knew this man wasn't illegal. She still had a relationship with him. She had a child with him. And now look. So it's just, and I don't care about people's feelings about, well, they were in love. Yeah, but look what the other parents are dealing with. Forget the love. She knew this man was an illegal alien, and she still went forward with setting up this familial situation that ended up with her being abused, her child growing up in that environment, and becoming then himself now, he's a shooter. He's a killer. He shouldn't have been here. The father shouldn't have been here, which would have precluded all of this drama. And I really, again, I don't care who likes what I say, if you agree with it or not. That's not my job. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to be agreed with. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is, this shooting doesn't happen if this guy isn't in the country illegally. If he'd been deported properly the first time or prevented from illegally entering in the first place. And again, see, when someone is prevented from entering illegally, it deters others from trying to enter illegally. The situation we have now is that the border is wide open, and so people are entering illegally, which encourages more people to do that. Now, that's not all of it. Now, what we have here is Acting Secretary of Defense Shanahan talking about building 256 miles of border wall. He says that's about a half a mile per day. He talks about the costs. It's number 4.
So in terms of the border barrier itself, the Army Corps of Engineers has a responsibility to build the barrier. We now have on contract sufficient funds to build about 256 miles of barrier. Over the course, just to give you a sense of 256 miles. And that represents DHS funds from 17 and 18, as well as federal or Treasury forfeiture funds, as well as reprogramming. How you will see this materialize in the next 6 months is in about 63 additional new miles of wall will come online, so about a half a mile a day will be produced. The RFAs, as you described about a year ago, we received our first request, and I think as of this morning we have 4,364 troops on the border. It's a mixture of guard and active. The primary role is doing monitor and detection, of which we have approximately 1,167 performing that mission, but we have a broader set of missions which range from logistical support to aviation support, food service, and there's the whole host of those. We, to more broadly answer your question, in terms of readiness, we've seen no degradation to readiness. In fact, in some cases, it's enhanced our readiness because the troops get to perform certain functions.
So the entirety of what he's sharing there is just trying to give an update to, Congress about what they're trying to do. And I hear a little bit of defeat in this man's voice, because in spite of everything that he might want to do, and think of the other government agencies that are buying shrimp and lobster and $900 office chairs. And believe me, I just recently bought an office chair for in here because we switched the desk out. I've been talking about this, and it's like a continuing saga. And one of the things that I noticed is that there's such a huge range. You can buy a chair for $99 or $150, or you can buy a chair for $1,200. I mean, this is a real thing. So those of us who have budgets and we have to pay for things ourselves, we go for the chair that fits our budget. But if you're working for a governmental agency and you're getting close to the end of the fiscal year, you're buying $900 chairs. You're ordering lobster and shrimp and steak. You're doing whatever you can to order down to basically spend down the rest of the money that's been allocated for your budget so that next year your budget won't be smaller. Instead of saying, wow, we just don't need an extra $900,000 for this office next year. Let's go ahead and let it go back into the Treasury because, American taxpayers might see that money going someplace else, somewhere else in the government, like the Department of Homeland Security, that needs every penny they can scrape up. So no matter what ideas they come up with, no matter what, innovations they might be willing to try, they can't do anything because their hands are tied because they don't have any more money because Nancy Pelosi won't let them. That's why he sounds defeated. That's why he sounds like that. All right, when we get back, we're going to have Marc Lotter. You keep it here.
The Ministry of Preborn meets abortion-minded women right where they are. When a young mom sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
This mom chose life for her baby.
She's been such a joy. Her name even means rebirth and sort of being raised up from the ashes. I now see my daughter, and I cannot imagine my life without my happy, lovely, joyful, smart baby, and I'm so grateful.
Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. One day I got a call about a friend of mine who had confessed to committing adultery. Well, my heart sank. As I hung up the phone, I sat back in my chair, and the names of other people I know who have done the same thing in recent years came to mind. I began to pray and weep. My heart was very heavy. I'm constantly reminded that it only takes one act to bring shame and discredit to the cause of Christ. In 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 4, we have the tragic story of David's fall into sin. Then it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem. Now when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around on the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance. So David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers and took her. I want to point out 4 reasons David sinned. Number 1, David sinned because he was at the wrong place. He should have been out there with his troops. Number 2, David sinned because he was alone. There was no sense of objective accountability around him. Number 3, David pursued his passion. He saw that woman and still had a choice, but he pursued her. And then number 4, David acted. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Don't be deceived. Don't trust yourself. If it happened to David, it can happen to any of us. Let's stay where we need to be, at the foot of the cross.
Crawford Loritz is senior pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey there, welcome back to the show. Head over to stacyontheright.com, hit the subscribe button. You can also go to @StacyOnTheRight on Twitter and Instagram and check out the cool content over there. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Marc Lotter, frequent guest on the program and friend of the show. He's with the Trump 2020 campaign, former spokesperson for Vice President Pence, and he's also been with the RNC as a spokesperson. Hey, Marc, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Stacy.
All right, let's talk about this. Exactly when do we get to move on from the shenanigans of this? I mean, it's not just a witch hunt anymore. It's like beating a dead horse who has already like decomposed all the way and it's just bones, and we're watching them pulverize those into ash.
Well, I know that the president would like to move on. The American people would like to move on, but the Democrats don't seem really interested or ready to do just that. And that's probably because they don't have any other agenda other than blatant socialism and some other crazy policies that they're out there supporting, and that's why they're doing this. And it's really important that that the American people remember this. When it comes to next November, that it's when we get a chance to not only reelect our president, but also to send a message that we want Congress that is going to do something. I saw a stat the other day. It was a week or two ago. So that this Congress has only enacted 16 laws. This entire, what we're now, 5 months, more than 5 months into it. If you go back to the previous Congress, they'd already enacted over 430. You talk about a do-nothing Congress, and that's because they're consumed more with investigation than legislation.
So, Mark, you make a fantastic point there, and I've seen a number of different, a number of stories out there. So there's this big CBC announcement. They say their dream ticket is for the Democratic 2020 nod. They say it's Biden and Kamala Harris, and of course they're pointing to demographics. Joe Biden, because his longevity with the party means he has all the name recognition that's needed. In spite of his comments about blacks and women and the sniffing and the kissing and all that, has the highest name recognition. And then there's Kamala Harris, who she's part black. She's, a woman. So demographic boxes are all checked. But both of them have now admitted that they believe that illegal aliens should have the same kind of health benefits that you and I have as natural born citizens. And Mark, they think gun confiscation is actually a thing that's going to happen. Oh, and don't forget, they also want to take away the health care of 177 million who have private health insurance plans through their employer. I mean, how do these two get elected?
It's really remarkable, and I'll tell you even something that's even scarier, Stacy. Just yesterday on one of the Sunday morning news programs, the former Secretary of Defense under the Obama-Biden administration was asked whether he thought that the former vice president would make a good commander-in-chief, and he had to pause and think about it. And then it reminded him of a statement he wrote in his own memoir when he said that Joe Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy and national security issue for the last 4 decades. This is a guy who worked next to him in the same administration who said that he has been wrong. He doesn't think China is a competitor. I mean, it just shows you how out of touch with reality that they really are.
So, okay, let's unpack that a little bit, because that was one. We're actually going to hear that audio a little later in the show, Mark. And I'm just like, that's one of the ones where I had to check twice to make sure that the person, because I read the title of the post, I watched the video, and I'm like, wait, does it say that he's an Obama administration official? They show images of them together, seated together at symposiums and government things and on Capitol Hill, and Barack Obama is meeting with them. They're standing together in the Obama administration, and this guy can't say anything nice about him. What is that like? How does that set the president up? Because he's obviously going to be running against whoever is their nominee. And people have fantasized about it being, Bernie Sanders, the socialist, and how they want to see Bernie Sanders beat Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders can't find his way towards creating a job out of a paper bag. And Joe Biden literally just took his hands off somebody else's wife a few minutes ago, sniffing her hair and touching her shoulders. How do they think they can beat the president with these people?
It really is remarkable that they have become so consumed with Trump derangement syndrome that, that they have gone to the far radical reaches of their party to try to find a nominee, or people who, can't even win a Senate race, or, twice before can't win the presidential nomination. I mean, it just shows you that they really are just searching. They're just searching for anything because they can't argue with what the president is doing. I mean, presidents of both parties for 30 years have called out China, but none of them had the strength to actually do something about it until Donald Trump got elected. And now we're dealing with it in a very strong fashion. The former vice president can't even admit that they're a competitor, let alone deal with the issue. Or when it comes to Iran, look what we're now facing and having to do confronting Iran, when the previous administration, and Joe Biden was a champion of this, that flawed Iran deal, which gave billions of dollars to the largest supporter of terrorism in the world, one of the greatest, if not the greatest threat to Israel in the world. I mean, this is what they're doing. I mean, if the president came out today and said the sky's blue, they would argue and say it's aqua. You know, they just can't agree with anything that this president says.
So let's also, because I mean they can't beat him on the economy, right, Mark? There is no comparison between the Obama administration and the Trump administration on the economy, creating jobs, reducing regulations, getting Americans in a footing where they can actually invest and, you know, do things with their money that they couldn't even dream of doing just a couple years ago. But on these other domestic issues, and even you mentioned the foreign policy front with Iran and the negotiations with China, I mean, I just don't see any, like, they're not in the same universe. This is not a fair fight. If it, you know, really honestly, it's like the media fight against Donald Trump isn't fair. He's treated so unfairly. It's kind of the opposite of that when it comes to his performance in comparison to what they're proposing.
Well, and you know, I'll tell you, Stacy, if you look at it over the course of history, you know, I mean, how many of our great presidents and some of the many great things that we have seen have been because of the disastrous Democrat leadership beforehand? Because of, you know, Carter's failures, Ronald Reagan did so many of the great things that he did. George W. followed with confronting terrorism when the Clinton administration buried their head in the sand. We saw the Obama-Biden administration basically apologize for American greatness around the world, and now you have President Trump having to go out and actually solve the problems, whether they're in North Korea or China or with Iran or actually dealing with Russia in a strong way. Another part of that interview yesterday with former Defense Secretary Robert Gates said that this administration was much tougher on Russia than the previous administration. And so it's because of that when America gets a leader who can show some strength, and the only thing that they can come back with is weakness.
So there's a couple things that I wanted to kind of touch on, which one of those is there's news out that one of the border people, actually it's Acting Secretary of Defense Shanahan, was discussing the 256 miles of border wall that are actually, their funds are allocated for that, and they're doing about a half a mile per day, and he was reporting on that. But I kind of feel like he sounds defeated when he's reporting on that, because that's not enough, and it doesn't address the you know, they're building these tent facilities to house illegal aliens, 500 a pop. I mean, it's just a monstrously bad situation at the southern border, and the president has literally, it's almost like they've got his hands tied behind his back and all he can do is talk. Where do you see the president going with that? Because that's an issue that he ran on it, he won on it. Americans want movement on that.
Well, unfortunately, because Congress won't do their job, and especially now under Democrat leadership in the House, we don't have any choice but to take these actions, which really just put a Band-Aid on the problem rather than dealing with the underlying cause. And as the president has said so many times, the problem with our immigration laws is that they were written and they were fashioned after a problem that was 20 or 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, our main problem on the southern border was primarily Mexican men coming across the border illegally seeking work. And so our laws were adjusted because of that. But right now, if a Mexican man comes across our border illegally, we can ship them home back to Mexico immediately, no questions asked. But if you're not from Mexico, if you're from Central America, the law is completely different. And if you're a family, it's even different beyond that. And so our laws have not kept up with the problem. Right now, 75% of the people who are coming across that southern border are from Central America, and many of them, and most of them, are family units or posing as family units, and the law requires us to deal with them differently, to the point that, according to a federal judge, we can't even hold families longer than about 28 days before we have to release them, and the only choice we have is to release them into the country for a court hearing that's going to be 4 or 5 years from now that they're never even going to show up to.
Yeah, I saw that story as well over the weekend. They were saying that, you know, the majority of these people don't show up for their hearings, even if the hearings are expedited. So I'm one of those people who I'm an immigration issue voter, and I'm concerned about what's happening. I'm concerned about moms and dads being internally separated from their kids, for the rest of their natural lives, because the kids are getting killed by these illegal aliens and drunk driving and actual murders, decapitations, you name it. It's just a horror show. And the president at one point, he proposed shutting the border down, not indefinitely, not forever, but for a period of time to bring Mexico to the realization that they need to cooperate with us on this as our southern border partner. And Leader McConnell came out against that, which I was shocked because it seemed like a logical solution to me. What do you think the president, his next move will be in trying to solve this? He's got enemies on both sides, it seems.
Well, and I think there's a couple of issues here. I mean, obviously the president reserves the right to be able to do that, but even because of his tough action and proposed tough action, we have seen a tremendous increase in enforcement from Mexico on people who are violating their southern border, coming in from Central America to get to our southern border. And so we're seeing Mexico step up. They do not want to have that happen because they know, as the president does, is that if you shut that border down completely, you're going to have a significant impact on our economy because there is such a free flow of goods and people across the border in both directions. But what we have to be able to do is protect this country. So the president's going to continue working. He's going to take any kind of action he can take legally to try to address the problem. In the meantime, he's getting challenged that every time he tries to fix the problem, even temporarily, liberal governors, liberal state and mayors and things like that run to the federal courts, and they get the courts to overrule and make law from their federal bench rather than from Congress and in the executive branch. So we do have to keep running over these problems, but the president's going to keep working on it. We're finally moving forward on the wall, which is great. It's unfortunate we have to do it the way we're doing it through a national emergency, but the president was serious. He said, we're going to do this. And since Congress wouldn't come to work with him, he took the steps that were necessary and were legal for him to be able to do it. So it's going to be a continuing battle. I can tell you it's still going to come up during this 2020 election. And going back to the point that I made very early, is that these are the kinds of things people have got to remember when they vote in 2020. It's not just enough to vote for President Trump, and we want you to do that.
Right.
But you've also got to remember that if you've got a Democrat representing you in Congress or in the Senate and you care about these things, well, it takes more than just the president. We need to continue our economic growth. We need to continue to show a strong on the military and on the world stage. And every chance they get, Democrats show weakness or would just prefer to kick the can down the road and ignore the problem rather than working with us to do something about it.
Yeah, you're dead on there, and I'm actually, obviously, Mark, I'm happy with what the president has been able to accomplish, especially the movement he's been able to get from Mexico. I think there's more that they could do, and obviously I'm sure the president is working on that behind the scenes. I think the national emergency is as much stink as the Democrats, raised up about it. It turns out everything's just fine. Nobody's died. It's working out fine. And I think that what we have to do is we have to hold the line. We can't forget that what they want is open borders. They want to eliminate our national sovereignty. And the only option that we have is between basically no candidate and President Trump, who's already there doing a great job. It's pretty obvious.
It's going to be such a stark choice. Let's remember, we talked about a lot of the other crazy policies that the Democrats have. You actually have some of their top candidates out there who want to take down the existing wall. How many of them have signed on to defund ICE and our immigration and customs enforcement people? I mean, this shows you how radical they have become. And when this gets down to just two people, I can guarantee you it's going to be an absolutely clear choice for the American people versus continuing economic strength, continuing our national security strength, or tucking tail and going the other direction.
Perfect. Perfectly put. Mark, I really love it when you come on and join us and give us updates straight from Capitol Hill and from the Trump 2020 campaign. Keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Stacy. Always good to be with you.
All right. Talk to you again soon. That's Marc Lauder. He's from the Trump 2020 campaign. He's also an RNC spokesperson, and he was the former spokesperson for Vice President Pence. And so we love having him take his time to share with us. When we get back, we're going to be going into the break here in just a minute. When we get back, we're going to take your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. When we come back in, you're going to hear Customs and Border Patrol Acting Deputy Chief speaking about the drug seizures and the apprehensions on the border. He says this is absolutely a crisis. And then we're going to get into that voter fraud issue. I was talking about the different stories across the country. You've got Oregon and New Jersey. That's literally two opposite ends of our nation where you have people getting convicted of tampering with our elections. And I know Russia's supposed to be the boogeyman here, and I don't doubt that they want to impact our elections, but we got problems with our own citizens, Americans, actually interfering in our election processes. So that's terrible, and we want to get into that as well. And then we are also going to be, just as we unpack those two stories, I've also got more for you today. Generic drug makers accused of price fixing by 44 states. You've got a terror training camp found in Alabama that's connected to New Mexico's terror plotters. The same guy owns both training camps. What? I said, what now? Why do we let these people live here? That's my question. If somebody was going to try to kill you, would you invite them over again and again? What are we doing? All right, when we get back, we'll have more. Stay there.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
Tony is analytical like his dad. He'll say, we can do this, and here's how we should go about it. As a result, his plans usually turn out well. We are opposites in a number of ways, but we've learned to respect and navigate our differences.
One thing you can do to discover the unique differences between you and your spouse is to talk with their family. As Lauren interacted with my family over the years, she learned more about me. I did the same with her family. This helped me see how Lauren was wired. I realized how special and wonderful she was.
And I was able to learn things about Tony that really helped in our uncommon marriage.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
I love AFR. You say it's on the radio too?
Here at American Family Radio, we know that many people find their audio entertainment in other places than the radio. So our programming is available with the AFR app on Apple and Android devices, through Amazon Alexa, and now available on Roku.
I just love the podcasts.
That too. American Family Radio, streaming or podcast, now available wherever you are. And we're on the radio.
There's a particular reason why there is a Back to God radio show. It was about 4 years ago, God called me out of the pulpit and said, Dexter, I need you to go tell my people it's time for them to get back to God, back to my morals, back to my values. This is the thing that you're supposed to do simply because you belong to the Most High God. It's the least that you could do for a God that loves you the way that he does.
Time to get back to God. Weekday afternoons at 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Donald Trump's America.
After receiving the cold shoulder from Washington for more than a decade, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban will visit the White House today to meet with President Trump. Energy security, defense cooperation, bilateral relations, and regional security will be on the agenda. Orban was shunned by the Obama administration, and the State Department frequently criticized his government for a weakening of the rule of law, as well as concerns over media freedom. The Orban government signed a bilateral defense cooperation agreement in April, and Hungary has recently signaled its interest in completing an arms deal with the U.S. On Friday, senior Trump administration officials said Hungary may be announcing increased defense purchases from America. The meeting with Orban is not without controversy, as the prime minister has been accused by critics as being anti-immigration, taking a hard line on Syrian migrants seeking asylum. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
This
soft-sided facility is necessary because of the unprecedented migrant flow that's currently coming across the border, specifically here in the Rio Grande Valley sector, but the numbers are up across the country. The facilities we have, including our centralized processing center that we built in 2014 during that crisis, they're full. We don't have anywhere to put these people, the migrants, until the rest of the government enterprise can move them through the rest of the process.
Wow. I don't have anywhere else to put these people. Now, wouldn't it make a lot of sense if these people, as he referred to them, simply could not enter the country illegally? Wouldn't it be great if they could just say, all full up, closed. If you're not coming in lawfully, you're not coming in. If you're applying for asylum, you have to do so from your home country. We have offices in your home country. Apply from there. Wouldn't that be something? Imagine how less strained our resources would be. They now have churches and private civic organizations coming in and doing the work. You know, you have border and customs patrol agents acting as babysitters, changing diapers, doing all kinds of things that that's not their job. They're not there as a worldwide babysitting service. It defies all logic what's going on down there. And I have so much more that we can go over there. If you're just tuning in, that was Customs and Border Patrol Acting Deputy Chief talking about the drug seizures and the apprehensions and how it really truly is a crisis. So we will go to the phones, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Right now, I want to get into this voter suppression stuff, but wait. Okay. Here's something we have to do right this second. And it's kind of a local thing, but I want to call it out. If you're listening anywhere in the state of Missouri, this takes just a quick second. Let me go over this with you. This is so important. I'm telling you, I'm so tired of us saying, well, all we got to do is vote for, our Republicans. And then, if we do that, then we're going to experience, better voting activities, better, whatever. It's not happening. So you've got the Republicans and here in the state of Missouri, and I just want to go over this bill. It's HB 350. It's up for a vote. And if it is voted out of committee, the Democrats will, strong arm the Republicans into passing it. It is the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, otherwise known as MONA, M-O-N-A. It's HB 350 and HB 208. It adds sexual orientation and gender identity to the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act. What it would do is give boys the ability to compete as girls against our daughters in the state of Missouri in sports, which we've seen in other states. It's a disaster. It's in committee. So in our legislature, you have to vote something out of committee before it can be voted on by the larger body. Dean Plocker is my representative and also someone who doesn't return phone calls or emails. And he is the one who is the chairman of the committee. He is a St. Louis County Republican elected to office, and Dean Plocker, I have his number on my Facebook, so you can look it up there so I don't have to give it out on the air. I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that. If you're a Missouri voter, you need to call him and tell him that you're watching and you're not even close to allowing him to get reelected if he decides to vote the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, to vote it out of committee so that sexual orientation and gender identity can be added. The Democrats have been bringing this up every legislative session for the past, I don't know how many years, ever since we as Missourians voted to add to our Constitution that marriage is between one man and one woman before Obergefell. So not only is it biological men competing against your daughter in sports, it's same sex, all the stuff that has to do with that same sex, whether it's churches being forced to hire people who don't believe what the Bible says, daycares being forced to hire people who have been convicted of pedophilia, or worse than that, anyone who's openly a pedophilia person, a pedophile, that person being able to work at a daycare because then it would be just a gender identity, just a sexual orientation, instead of something that we can all rightly agree we shouldn't be promoting. Now, last year, 2 Republicans joined with the Democrats on the committee to vote the bill to pass. Chairman Robert Cornejo, who's now the director of Missouri's Labor Relations Department, and Representative Gene Evans, who's now the executive director of the Missouri Republican Party. Those two voted to support moving this bill out of committee so that it could be passed. This year, the person you want to call to stop it is Dean Plocker. So you can find this information on the Facebook page. If you're a Missourian, if you're a Missouri voter, call your legislator, call Dean Plocker's office, let him know this isn't okay for you. This isn't what you want. This isn't what you're voting for. This isn't the reason he was sent to the legislature. This isn't the reason why the Republicans have a supermajority. Let him know. Okay? The number's on my Facebook page. All right. So back to the show. And that's a local update. Got to let that stuff happen. And if you're in the listening audience and you have a big legislative update, something like that, especially if it's on one of our core issues for American Family Association, just email me at stacyontheright@gmail.com or DM me on Facebook or something like that and send the information over. We'll share it here on the show because we want to make sure that these legislators know we're still watching, we're still paying attention. Yeah, we have groceries to buy and kids to take care of. We have families and budgets and mortgages and we have to pay our utility bills, but we're still watching these legislators and we're not going to let them get away with this stuff. You don't get to be a Republican and get away with this stuff. You want to vote and make, all these things legal and lawful and add the boys to the girl sports, do that on the Democratic side. Don't do it as a Republican. We're tired of it. We're watching. We're not going to put up with it. All right. So I talked to you a little bit about this voter fraud. So let's go over these. There's two instances here. You got Francesco Carmagna of Elmwood Park, New Jersey. He's been charged with interfering with the secrecy of the election process. Breathe in, breathe out. He's the acting Bergen County prosecutor, Dennis Calo, announced the arrest of Francesco Carmagna. He's married. He's retired. They give his address. The arrest is the result of an investigation conducted by members of the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office under the direction of Chief Robert Anzalotti. In early April of 2019, the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office received a complaint against Carmagna, the mayor of Elmwood Park, alleging that he interfered with the election process with regard to applications for vote by mail ballots in the 2017 mayoral election. BCPO detectives conducted an investigation which revealed that on or about during and between March of 2017 to November of 2018, Carmagna, who was a mayoral candidate at the time, had interfered with the secrecy of the election process by completing portions of the application for vote by mail ballot, primary election ballot certifications, and general election ballot certifications of registered voters in the borough of Elmwood Park, New Jersey. Now, Carmagna has since resigned as mayor of Elmwood Park as of April 28th of 2019, and as a result of the investigation, he was charged on April 29th of 2019 with one count of interfering with the secrecy of election process. It's a third-degree crime. He's scheduled for his first appearance in Central Judicial Processing Court in Hackensack, New Jersey on May 22nd. Now, he's presumed innocent. Obviously, he hasn't been convicted. But so when someone tells you, you can't talk about election fraud, that never happens. Well, apparently it happened in New Jersey, right? But that's not all, because I hate it when you just have one example. I like to have multiple examples to make sure that people can't actually act like, well, that's a one-off. That just doesn't happen a lot. Oh, doesn't it? 10 voters in Oregon have pled guilty to voter fraud in the 2016 presidential election. 10 voters. So what they did, first of all, the convictions represent a tiny fraction of the 2,051,000 plus votes cast in the election. Oregon voters elected Democratic Governor Kate Brown and chose Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump for president. The Oregon Department of Justice started pursuing the cases after the Secretary of State's office forwarded 56 cases of possible voter fraud from September of 2017. The 10 convictions represent a broad spectrum of age, party affiliation, and geography. Those convicted include 4 Democrats, 1 Republican, 1 Libertarian, and 4 people who claim no party affiliation. Most of the convictions involve people who cast a ballot in 2 separate states. Many of the cases initially involved felony charges, but all were eventually reduced to a violation, which, as an aside, I don't know how they expected to deter election fraud by reducing the charges to simple violations. How do you get people to say, you know what, I don't think I want to do voter fraud? None of these people are going to jail. The maximum penalty was $1,000 and 10 hours of community service, and that was issued to 45-year-old Michael Cruz of Portland. On the low end, a judge waived a proposed $440 fine on 40-year-old Jeremy Robbins, also of Portland. Prosecutors said Robbins cast a ballot in both Oregon and Washington. So he knew he was doing wrong. He knew he was. At the time of the election, he says he was suffering from kidney infections, which impacted his cognition. Really? He didn't remember voting 2 ballots, but acknowledges that he did, and he's extremely remorseful. Come on now. The most recent conviction was of Betty Clark of Haines, Oregon. Clark was 76 at the time of the election. She'd been temporarily living in Vancouver, Washington, in order to care for her elderly father. Then, while there, she received a ballot in the mail for the upcoming election. She filled it out and returned it. Then her father passed away. She and her husband moved back to their rural Baker County home. There was an Oregon ballot waiting for her there. She says she forgot about the other one. It was an innocent mistake. There was no criminal intent whatsoever. Yeah, okay. So she was charged with voting in 2 states, which is a felony, but after an agreement with the prosecutors, the charges were dropped. She didn't even have to appear in court. So she's very embarrassed. She was under a lot of stress at the time. Blah, blah, blah. So as long as you don't have a criminal history, you can get away with this kind of garbage. The youngest person who was charged was Katie Meyer of Medford. Edmondson said Meyer was an 18-year-old college student attending school in Colorado at the time of the 2016 election. There was a big push on campus to register to vote, which she did. Her parents also mailed her the Oregon general election ballot, and she received a Colorado ballot. She does not remember filling out both, but acknowledges that she must have. Edmondson said Meyer has since canceled her Colorado voter registration. She was fined $225. Not all of the cases involved voting in 2 separate states, though. Prosecutors Marjorie Gale of Hood River, prosecutors said Marjorie Gale of Hood River cast her own ballot and that of her daughter, who was away at college. So she had no other history of multiple voting, and based on the circumstances, we determined that a violation was appropriate, and so she was fined $750. 14 additional cases have not been resolved. The remainder were referred back to the Oregon Secretary of State's office for possible civil violations. So these are not the dramatic voter, suppression, voter tampering, that type of stuff, stories that, would make for just, looky-loo. But the fact is, if these cases are indicative, people forgetting, people voting twice and saying they don't remember it, imagine how many more times that has happened. And if it has happened that many times in Oregon, imagine how much is happening across the country. Now, it's true that a person can make an innocent mistake. I'm not doubting that. But what I am saying is that the idea that voter fraud is not something that happens, or it's not something that people do intentionally, because these cases make it sound like it's just a bunch of, kind of absent-minded but very well-intentioned Americans. And then some of them very well may have been. But there's also the instances that have been documented by Project Veritas of individuals in swing states and highly important states, meaning, large numbers of electoral college votes, busing people from precinct to precinct, admitting that they engage in voter fraud, and there's been no investigation and nothing's been done about those. So the idea that there isn't any voter fraud and that we don't have to be concerned about our electoral processes here in this country, not true. Our biggest threat is not Russians running $70,000 in ads on Facebook. Our biggest threat is the idea that we have this huge media. It's not just an idea. It's fact. We have this media apparatus that is just out there continually shilling for one party and processing as truth lies directly into the psyche of Americans. 40% of Americans think Russian influence actually tipped the scales in the 2016 election. They did not. They did not determine who would be the president of the United States. They tampered with the elections, sure. They've done that before. Their impact was minimal. The idea that they did something like that and that it actually impacted the elections is something that CNN and MSNBC have put out there relentlessly, so much so that now millions and millions and millions, 40% of Americans believe it. It's not true. That is far more dangerous to our election integrity than what Russia did. We've got to have the truth out there, which is why I'm so glad you're making your home here at American Family Radio, American Family Association, Urban Family Talk, that you're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your partnership with us and your time that you spend with comments and listening and emailing and just interacting with us and supporting us. We appreciate you. We love you. And it's Monday and the sun is shining. And so all I can do is give glory to God and keep it moving. All right. God bless you from the Heartland. Citizens, until tomorrow.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power. So you know businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith. So we know Satan is watching us. Engage Magazine is for millennials by millennials. And it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Iranian military leaders are talking tough as tensions between the U.S. and the Middle Eastern nation mount. Simon Owen has more.
A commander in Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guard saying American military assets in the Gulf used to be a serious threat, but now represent a target. This after the US deployed an aircraft carrier and warplanes to the Middle East, accusing Iran of making threats. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has spent the day in Brussels talking Iran with European allies, some of whom are concerned.
We are very worried about the risk of a conflict happening by accident.
Britain's Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt calling for a period of calm. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
A conservative columnist supports the plan by the White House to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to rein in federal district court judges who can issue rulings that effectively prevent the president from fulfilling constitutional duties. During a recent speech, Vice President Mike Pence said low-level district court judges have imposed more nationwide injunctions against Trump than the first 40 presidents combined. And the vice president added, quote, "This judicial obstruction is unprecedented." Columnist Robert Knight.
You know, it's bad enough when 9 Supreme Court judges overrule the people of the United States in any number of ways, but it's doubly bad when it's a single judge at a district level somewhere saying that he or she knows more than the President of the United States or the Congress and decides to dictate the law. This has been going on too long. This is judicial tyranny at its worst. And it's high time that the reckless power of individual judges was reined in.
Knight believes Chief Justice John Roberts could be the deciding vote if the White House does get to plead its case before the High Court. A conservative commentator is calling a foul on the men's basketball team at the University of Virginia. This after the Cavaliers won the NCAA tournament and decided not to attend the White House ceremony.
University of Virginia men's basketball coach Tony Bennett says some players are seeking pro opportunities, others are moving on, and it would be difficult to get everyone together. Stacy Washington of the black conservative group Project 21 says this would never have happened under Barack Obama.
But in the past, if there was a White House visit and it was President Obama, you just hang around or you fly back or you fly directly to D.C. and you get there by hook or by crook, but it's an opportunity to have a photo op at the White House. Now it's, we want a Trump hate.
Washington says the boycott comes in the midst of a petition signed by 15,000 urging the team to forego the visit because of President Trump's alleged hate and racism.
It's Trump derangement syndrome. People who hate Donald Trump so much, they think meeting with him and shaking his hand is tantamount to like promoting hate when the true hate is in their heart.
UVA College Republicans President Robert Andrews calls the petition petty politicization according to Campus Reform. I'm Bob Kellogg.
A piece of tech nostalgia is up for sale. Mike Gunzeman has details.
It may be time to start digging through your closet or that old desk. That's because someone on eBay is selling their original Apple iPod for nearly $20,000. The mini white-colored device with that scrolling wheel in the middle of it helped reshape the music industry by playing MP3s, as well as helped launch what would eventually become the iPhone. Now, nobody has purchased the factory-sealed music player just yet, and if it does sell for that price, it will be over 400 times the original 2001 price. Mike Gunzelman, Fox News.
And some people enjoy the taste of a rare steak or even a hamburger. But a new warning from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics says you should never ever consume an undercooked hamburger. The reason why ground meat isn't safe has to do with the very nature of its creation. Grinding the meat extends the fabrication or cutting process one more level. Usually, pathogens are found on the surface of the muscle tissue, so once you start grinding up the meat, you're dispersing the pathogens throughout more of the meat beyond the surface. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Bishop Vincent Matthews.
Every one of my children have gone to college, that are in college on an academic scholarship. And we taught them in our home. So reevaluate. Wherever you bought your hair or got it done, one day it's going to be out of style. But your heritage is not just for what am I going to do today. It's for your children's 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 children.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
This April saw the highest number of apprehensions made in a single month in 12 years. There were more than 98,000 immigrants apprehended in April trying to cross the border illegally. That's up 159% compared to April of last year when 38,000 immigrants were apprehended.
What we have to do is remove those loopholes. We have to allow people to be detained, keep the family together, but keep them there and adjudicate that case quickly. So we need resources to do that.
We're going to stop Central American applications being made at the border because we don't have enough judges for hearing dates. We're going to go to 100 days. We can hold minor children for 100 days so that we can actually process the entire family without letting them go. We're going to increase judges by 500.
We have a crisis at the border, a national emergency declared by the president. The commander-in-chief has given me a direct legal order to secure the border. I'm securing the border.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hey, welcome back to the program, everybody. We are just moving along. I want to say happy Mother's Day belatedly to moms out there who celebrated yesterday. If you were anything like me, I was so busy yesterday just doing stuff and trying to get things done and trying to enjoy the day. Our oldest is still at college, so she wasn't home, but she sent me some nice notes. And with my husband and the remaining children, one of which he had big plans yesterday. And so we ended up just having a really smaller kind of group of us together. But we got so much done, and that was what I asked for instead of gifts and things like that. I just wanted some help to get some stuff done around here. And they were so kind to oblige. And I want to say happy Mother's Day to everyone, especially those who you've lost your mom and you're kind of trying to navigate the holiday without her. It's God's blessings on you and his peace. I'm praying for that. And it was a nice, busy day, and it was kind of rainy and it was intermittently sunny. And so we got some stuff done outside and then inside, and it was just nice. It was just nice to try to get some things done. And I want to show on the live stream, and I'll take a picture because I didn't post anything on social media. And at first I was kind of feeling bad about it. And then I remembered, you know what? I'm not required to post stuff on the holidays. I'm allowed to just unplug and just, let go. And so that's what I did. And so I if you're one of those people who you didn't get a Facebook post up, that's okay. You enjoy yourself and you don't have to feel guilty at all. All right, so what we have going on right now, I want to give you a little bit of information about what we're going to talk about here in hour 2 of the program. We have the acting ICE director describing thousands of arrests, seizures, targeting gangs, smugglers, and drugs. So we're going to be talking more immigration. We also have that audio that we kind of previewed with Marc last hour about President Obama's defense secretary blasting Biden as wrong on every foreign policy issue in the last 4 decades. And then this story about the generic drug makers accused of price fixing in 44 states. So upsetting, because if you have any prescriptions at all, you know you must have the option of having generic drugs. The generic drugs make it possible for some your insurance doesn't cover it, for you to be able to get what you need. And so this idea that people would say, no, we're not going to work together. Come on. So we'll cover that story as well. Right now, let's get to this acting ICE director. It's number 2.
In FY18, HSI made 4,333 arrests of gang leaders, members, and associates, including 959 Mara Salvatrucha MS-13 members. Our special agents helped take more than 750 firearms off the street through these investigations, and we intend to expand on that success going forward. Additionally, last FY, HSI identified and assisted more than 1,477 crime victims, including 308 human trafficking victims and 715 child exploitation victims. Leveraging its border enforcement security task forces, HSI is increasing investigation and enforcement activities, combating organizations that illicitly introduce and distribute fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine into and throughout the United States. Narcotics enforcement efforts throughout FY18 resulted in more than 11,400 criminal arrests, with seizures totaling more than 1 million pounds.
Seizures totaling more than 1 million pounds. And you know what I really would love? I would love if I could come on here and say, victory. Everybody start pumping up your hands and praise dancing, because guess what? We've gotten that number down, or we have lowered the number of border apprehensions, or, the president implemented a new plan that has completely shut off, just squeezed off the flow of drugs through the southern border. Or fewer people are addicted to, illicit narcotics this year than last year. Fewer deaths through opioid overdoses this year than last year. Fewer opioid addictions. Those kinds of things only happen when we have everybody basically eyes front, right? Eyes front, focused in on the issue. Not just that we're praying about it, not just that we're talking about it, but that we're controlling our legislators, and that they are, regardless of political party or ideology, acknowledging that there's a crisis at the border and doing something about it. That's right. That they're actually saying, you know what's bigger than me? My constituents. You know what's bigger than my desire to have single party rule from here on into the foreseeable future? Americans being killed by illegal aliens. You know what's bigger than my desire to have, a socialist utopia? Not having people die on my watch. And until we get there, we're going to continue to have this intransigence. We know what the problem is. We know what to do about it, but our hands are tied because the political process has been so subverted that we can't get what needs to get done. And that's just crazy. It's nonsensical. It's out of control. And so we've got to be aware of what's going on down there, which is why, we have this audio from U.S. Border Patrol Chief. He says the record number of illegal crossings at the southern border, they defy description, but here he is talking about it. It's number 3.
Time and time again, my agents continue to go above and beyond. Just a few weeks ago, agents rescued a 3-year-old boy abandoned by smugglers in a cornfield with only his name and his parents' phone number written on his shoes. Agents have rescued more than 2,200 migrants endangered by ruthless smugglers so far this year. As we sit here today, thousands more are being encouraged to bring or send their children to our border based on smugglers' false promises of a safe and easy journey. Our apprehension numbers are off the charts compared to recent years, As of April 30th, we apprehended 460,294 people on the southern border. In the last week, we had our highest single day, over 5,200 apprehensions, and our single largest group of 421 illegal aliens. As of Sunday, only 7 months into the year, we have now surpassed the total southwest border apprehensions of every fiscal year since 2009.
So numbers like that are staggering. Staggering. And this isn't an issue or a case of us saying, well, you know, we wouldn't talk about this issue because other issues aren't really good for us. The GOP actually has a number of issues that really just, it couldn't be going better. The economy, I mean, just, you know, it's a dead horse you can keep beating because it makes sense to talk about what's working. But what's not working is the southern border. Now you might be wondering, well, what are they working on? What is actually happening? Well, let's go to the Supreme Court for a second because we can get an update there. The Supreme Court is back in session and they're poised to issue 5 big decisions. They are actually considering the 2 allegedly partisan gerrymandering cases, the citizenship questions on the census, another issue related to the separation of church and state, jury selection, racial bias in a death penalty case, and whether Apple is fair game for a class action lawsuit regarding iPhone apps. Now, I actually heard a little bit about this earlier today. I was, running around and trying to catch up with some like during the week type stuff. And I ended up, just listening on the radio to some kind of updates to this story. And so the court has ruled against Apple. Now, the Supreme Court was considering today, before the ruling, whether or not to allow a class action lawsuit to proceed that alleges Apple has a monopoly over iPhone apps. A group of consumers claim that app developers are artificially inflating the price for apps because Apple receives 30% of each sale that's made through the App Store. Now, the company argues that only app developers can sue over an alleged monopoly, not the app purchasers. Well, the court ruled against Apple. They are going to allow the lawsuit by consumers to proceed. Brett Kavanaugh actually joined the court's 4 liberals in rejecting a plea from Apple to end the lawsuit. Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion. In other words, Apple as a retailer pockets a 30% commission on every single app sale, he stated, and that was enough to convince the majority of the justices to allow the suit to go forward. I think there's an interesting dynamic going on here. First of all, Kavanaugh has proven that he will rule individually on a case-by-case basis and that his ideology has not made him so rigid that he cannot see the other side of an argument. It makes him an interesting justice to watch and perhaps potentially a very dangerous justice on some of the issues that we're praying, we're fasting, we're petitioning and going up, literally saying, Lord, we need movement on this. We should pray for him on the issue of pro-life, on the issue of religious freedom. We should pray for him about those issues. Here with this Apple thing, I think it's kind of crazy. And I know 30% of 99 cents on an app means the app isn't 99 cents. Or it means the app is really 60 some odd cents and they're charging you 99 cents for it. If they're charging you $3.99, obviously 30% is a larger number, but we're still only talking about, dollars, fractions of a dollar, etc. But on the larger scheme, when you think about the multiple hundreds of millions of app purchases per year, you can see where this is very lucrative for Apple, and they've locked out other sellers from this process. So it's going to be interesting to see what the court does with this now that the lawsuit is going to be allowed to proceed. So on these other issues, citizenship on the census, well, liberal justices obviously believe that the census question is improper. It wasn't improper before, but it is now. Anyway, what's the news? Where's the news there? This is a widely anticipated decision. I'm hoping it comes down in favor of the Trump administration, but we'll see. Opponents claim that asking about citizenship will cause non-citizens and possibly illegal aliens to skip the question or census altogether, which will result in an accurate population count. Actually, it would result in a more accurate population count because you could count the number of people present for other things that the government tallies for, and then you could compare that number to the census completion rates, and you could get a very clear picture of how many people are in a state or county illegally, right? And that is what liberals do not want. Remember, census data is used to determine congressional representation, and that is something that should not be skewed one way or the other by illegal aliens. We need that question. And then the gerrymandering issue. So these types of issues on gerrymandering typically fall right down partisan lines on SCOTUS. And according to The Hill, based on the questions justices asked during arguments before the court on the two current cases, the high court's judges are split on this issue. North Carolina Democrats are actually arguing that Republicans drew the state's congressional districts in favor of the GOP. Meanwhile, Republicans in Maryland charged that Democrats in their state redrew in such a way that it eliminated a GOP congressional seat. Now, prior rulings by the Supreme Court have noted that drawing congressional districts is inherently political, and it's extremely difficult to define when such maps are too partisan. So that, obviously, if it skews to one side or the other, the gerrymandering, the purpose of gerrymandering is to make it so that people of like votes can vote together and increase their political power. That's what it is. Drawing congressional districts, that's what it involves. So conservatives on the bench during the arguments seemed hesitant to rule, implying that the states themselves should make the decisions. And liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg asked if there was any genuine doubt that Maryland Democrats intended to deprive Republicans of the seat by redrawing the district. Sometimes she just hits it right on the head, huh? She's still alive and kicking, y'all. Good for her. All right, we'll be back with more after this. Stay there.
I wanted to have the abortion because I was trying to hide the situation.
When a young mom in crisis walks into a preborn pregnancy center, she's welcomed with open arms and given love, support, and a free ultrasound to meet her unborn baby. This young woman not only chose life for her baby, but heard the message of Jesus Christ and was comforted from the guilt and pain that plagued her. Preborn centers lead the nation in providing free ultrasounds. When an abortion-minded woman sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to choose life for her baby. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and 100% of your sponsorship goes towards saving babies. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
One of the lines that Senator Bernie Sanders uses often in his campaign is his concern that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Since he and other candidates will continue to proclaim this slogan, it's worth taking a moment to critique it. While it is true that the rich are getting richer, it is not true that the poor are getting poorer. Let's put both economic figures on the table for America. In a recent video, John Stossel estimates that the wealth of the richest people doubled over the last 4 decades. But it's also true that poor Americans got 32% richer during that same period of time. You may have read different statistics, but they're all about the same order of magnitude, so let's assume that they're close to accurate. A good question might be, why worry when some people get richer since poor people are also doing better? Sure, the percentages are different, but shouldn't we applaud the fact that a rising tide floats all boats? And let's look worldwide. In previous commentaries, I have documented the fact that 1 billion people have been raised out of extreme poverty. A corollary to this slogan is the claim being made that there's a lack of income mobility. Certainly there is some truth to that. Children born to rich parents have a better advantage than children born into poverty, but we're not locked into an economic class. Economists at Harvard University and the University of California at Berkeley found that the richest fifth of Americans fell out of that bracket within 20 years. And those born to the poorest fifth climbed to the highest quintile, sometimes even to the top. Look at the Forbes richest list and you will find self-made billionaires who didn't inherit money. My point is simple. These campaign slogans sound true and reasonable until you look at some of the economic studies. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being with us today. We have so much to talk about. Like these jihadi training camps. Yeah, I said it. So the current story is about this training camp found in Alabama that's connected to the New Mexico terror plotters. And it's just bizarre. Remember the bust in New Mexico? So there was a training camp in New Mexico. The same guy that owned that one also owned a terror training camp in Alabama. The FBI has found that second camp. At first glance, it looks like an abandoned dump. It honestly looks like something that it would just like not be a big deal, like a bunch of pallets, tires piled up. You know, they used pallets, they stacked them on top of each other, and then draped tarps over them to create makeshift dwellings. Lots of empty plastic barrels lined up with like the regular wire fencing set on top. So you have to crawl on top of the barrels, on top of the fencing. Weird, just weird. It looks like garbage, really. Like a makeshift military style obstacle course. And you've got this small group of terrorists that actually live there. Siraj Wahaj, who owned the property up a long dirt road just a few miles from downtown Tuskegee. And that's Tuskegee, Alabama. The property is similar to another one in New Mexico that the group is now linked to, where federal prosecutors say Wahaj and 4 other suspects were training children to carry out deadly terror attacks in America. I'm sorry, y'all. What? So FBI Assistant Director for the Counterterrorism Division, Michael McGarity, told lawmakers on Capitol Hill there are 850 open domestic terrorism investigations with 40% racially motivated violent extremism. The details are kind of crazy. There was the remains of a child that were discovered. The other kids who were saved told the police that that child was killed during an exorcism that the Muslims performed on him. They believed if they got rid of the demons in the child, he would host the return of Jesus Christ and lead them to victory over their enemies. What is this nonsense? Again, we're letting the wrong kinds of people into America. Oh yeah, I said it. I know people get so ticked when I don't care if people get upset. So you've got the MOA, which I guess it's also known as FUCRA. It's composed primarily of Black American Muslim converts, many who converted to Islam while in prison. MOA members, many of them reside in rural communities, they call them Jamaats, to live and worship free from non-Muslim influence. MOA Jamaats are located on land that has been privately owned or rented by members. Each Jamaat usually has numerous trailers where their members live, a mosque, a guard post, some with armed guards at the entrance of the properties. Now, these communities are similar to commune-type facilities, and there have women and children residing in them, with the children being homeschooled. Organized training is also conducted to include weapons training, tactics, hand-to-hand combat, rappelling, and live fire exercises. Now, what am I talking about? Well, the Clarion Project has this report that they got. They put it together by documents that they received from the FBI. And they're reporting about this Jamaat al-Fuqra training members in isolated communities across America and Canada. They have a place called Islamburg, headquartered in upstate New York. That is their most well-known Islamic village. Fuqra, which now goes by the names of the Muslims of Americas, among other titles, is a cultish Islamic group with a history of crime and terrorism. The group is led by Sheikh Mubarak Ali Jilani in Pakistan. Now, you might be thinking, well, I mean, no, there's no way we can write this off or kind of, poo-poo it. It's FBI confirming jihadi training camps in America. This is at the Clarion Project, hardly, a place of ill repute, not some, kind of backwater site on the internet. This is a real website with real reporting that they've gotten from government sources and information, including the FBI. Now, they have a website called fucrafiles.com, which is the Clarion Project's comprehensive website about the group. And FUCRA has a documented history of conducting basic paramilitary training in America and elsewhere. So they've even held more extensive Pakistan training, Kashmir training for their members. So they take them overseas and train them, and then bring them right back here to the good old US of A to live in the rural areas, which there's something interesting about this. And just think about it for a second. Liberals are constantly talking about how we should stop having babies because there's we have an overgrowth of human beings and the population is exploding, and there's just no more room in America for Americans. So by all means, stop having babies. That's what they keep saying. But then if you look at this story, clearly we have enough landmass to host tons, just gobs of Muslims from around the world who come here and populate our rural areas and train up terrorists. So if the country is overbrimming with people and we can't fit anymore, how are we fitting in all the illegal aliens? How are we fitting in the Muslims who are moving here to do the terror training camps? You can't have it both ways. So I will post the link to the story. They've actually got just one more detail about these people. You've got one of FUCRA's terrorist training camps is on a 101-acre tract of land in Colorado. It was raided back in 1992 and subsequently abandoned by the group. And this was verified by a KRDO news report with Heather Skold. You can see pictures of the investigation into that camp on the FUCRA Files website. They were the subject of an episode of America's Most Wanted back in 1994. Now, the FBI documents from 2009 to 2011 state that FUCRA has about a dozen Jamaats in America. They claim to have 22 Islamic villages in America. Unbelievable. It's an autonomous organization which possesses the infrastructure capable of planning and mounting terrorist campaigns overseas and within the U.S. So I'll put the story up. You can check it out for yourself. Clearly, more lies by people who say Americans shouldn't have kids. If anything, that should spur you on if you're in the childbearing years to think, you should have the children that you want to have. You should have the children that when you pray, God leads you to have. Not what some liberal is telling you. Well, we have an overgrowth of population. Do we? Are all the rural areas of America filled with Americans? Are all of every bit of square acre that we have filled with American people? No? Okay. Because if we're having a population explosion and and Americans shouldn't have more kids, then we certainly can't have any more immigration, lawful or illegal, right? Only one of those things can be true. Okay, so breaking news. I just saw an alert from the Epoch Times. Apparently, the mom who did all of the different things with her daughters, I just saw the news alert come by. I'm looking for it now. She pled guilty. It's just such a sad story. The admission scandal. Felicity Huffman. Oh, geez. Okay, so she just pled guilty. This is so sad. And it's not sad because I, only feel sorry for her because she's a rich elitist. That's not it at all. I'm just thinking about the children, her kids, her family, and how unnecessary this was. Sometimes when these kind of stories, when they come out, I think to myself, how many families out there would give anything to have the kind of access that she's had and the kind of career that she's had, just a fraction of it, to not be living, in a poverty-stricken situation or struggling or dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And you have her literally paying $15,000 for someone to cheat on her eldest daughter's entrance exam. So she was crying as she discussed her daughter with U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani of Boston. I wonder how that went. Devin Sloan, a Los Angeles-based water services executive, also pled guilty, the fifth parent to enter a guilty plea in the biggest college admission scandal the U.S. has ever reported. Like all of the 14 parents who have agreed to plead guilty, Huffman and Sloan are charged with a single count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services mail fraud. The charge carries a maximum term of 20 years in prison, although federal sentencing guidelines can bring that number down significantly for parents who acknowledge their crime, have a clean record, and meet other criteria. Huffman, you remember her from Desperate Housewives, they allegedly paid William Rick Singer one of the smallest sums in the entire deal. And the drinking water and wastewater company Aquatecture LLC, the founder of that company, was accused of paying Singer $250,000 to get his son into the University of Southern California as an international water polo player. The school didn't even have a water polo team, but he got in. So the plea deals are being worked out, and the story is it's just so sad. It just goes to show you that some people will never, ever, ever be satisfied. It doesn't matter what they have, and that the human heart is depraved and wicked. So, Rashida Tlaib, remember the three freshman congressmen on the Democratic side who make the most waves, get the most attention, and say the most outrageous things. You remember last week she said that it gave her a sense of amazing peace hearing about the Holocaust because she knew that the Palestinians were supportive of the Jewish people who were being persecuted. Well, this morning, President Trump smacked her for saying that. He said in his tweet, Democratic Representative Tlaib is being slammed for her horrible and highly insensitive statement on the Holocaust. She obviously has tremendous hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. Can you imagine what would happen if I ever said what she said and what she has said? I honestly believe that she should resign. Her anti-Semitism is so rank and ridiculous. It's unbelievable. So Steve Scalise also commented, his statement was, there is no justification for the twisted and disgusting comments made by Rashida Tlaib just days after the annual Day of Holocaust Remembrance. More than 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, and there's nothing calming about that. I think his statement is probably one of the best I've heard so far. I read a lot of the tweets that were in response to what she said. Now, according to Ed Morrissey, a friend over at Hot Air, Tlaib is being criticized for the wrong thing. He points out that the criticism has mainly fallen on her wording, which was clumsy and sounded offensive when clipped out of context. She didn't express warm feelings about the Holocaust itself, but she did suggest that the Palestinians giving the Jews refuge after the Holocaust was what gave her a calming feeling. But her inaccurate view of history is what we should be criticizing here. The Palestinians never gave Jewish people a place of refuge after the Holocaust. They weren't even there. Palestinians, quote unquote, this group of people that we call Palestinians today, they weren't around waiting in their country to take in Jewish people from the Holocaust. America did that. They didn't offer anyone safe haven. Jewish people weren't thrust on Palestinians. Jewish people had lived in the region for a millennia, and the diaspora had begun returning in the late 19th century with the Zionist movement. The Ottoman government didn't take much of an interest in it at that time, and then the British seized the region after World War I as a part of the Sykes-Picot arrangement of the post-Ottoman Middle East. The British pledged to provide Jews a safe homeland before that war and followed through, although while still insisting on it being a part of the British Empire. So you know how the Brits can do. So if anyone provided a safe haven, it was the British. But in truth, Jewish people had been building a revitalized homeland for decades before the Holocaust. It was the somewhat bizarre partition after independence that set off the chain reaction leading to where we are today. The Arabs, who had only lightly populated what they call Palestine now, resisted the idea of a Jewish state when Israel achieved independence. For decades prior to that, however, Arab states had also been ejecting Jewish people from all over the Middle East as well, forcing many to relocate to Israel. Hebron would be one good example of the quality of the safe haven offered by Palestinians, for that matter, and a pretty good example of what would happen, what would come about if Tlaib got the solution she wanted. Tlaib really wants to establish a Palestinian state in Israel. Now remember, Israel is just a tiny sliver of land. It's just a teensy-weensy little sliver. It was nothing but sand and really just nothing much. And the Jewish people went in there and they have turned it into a little spot of paradise in the Middle East. So that's why Arabs want to take it back from them. Now that they've fixed it up, they want to take it back. Now, what would happen if Palestine was allowed to overrun the Jewish people, the Palestinians, quote unquote? Well, they would just eliminate the state of Israel. They would eliminate it and they call it Palestine. They would overrun the Israelis. The Palestinian Arabs, basically rejects from all the neighboring Arab countries, greatly outnumber the Israelis. They want to force all of the things that Israel is fighting against into reality. So it would also leave, if Tlaib got her way, it would leave the protection of Jewish people up to the Palestinians, which we know how that ends. 600 rocket attacks, the end of Jewish people in the Middle East. And then they would all turn their collective heads to the West and try to run us down. We all know that's not happening, but that's the way they would want it to go down. All right, people. When we get back, we'll have more for you. Keep it here.
This is Kay Arthur. Are you hungry for love? Unconditional love, because unconditional is what you need. You've blown it, made a mess of life, and deep inside you wonder if anyone could love you the way you are. God does, and that's why God let his only son, Jesus Christ, die on a cross almost 2,000 years ago. Jesus died for you because God knew you would fail to measure up. That's how much God loves you. The Bible, God's book, says while you were a sinner, a person who failed and missed God's standard, Jesus died for you. But that's not all. God raised Jesus from the dead. Because Jesus lives forever, you can too. If you want unconditional love, dear one, and a new start on life, call 888-NEED-HIM. Let me repeat that. If you would like to speak to someone right now about beginning a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, call 888-NEED-HIM.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called TuneIn. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
Abraham Hamilton III.
Don't you realize when you see some of the inner workings of the cell, with each component having its role to play, where you have soldiers and you have operators, you have little machines that are working, if the Lord would do that with something as micro and as undetectable by the natural eye as the cell, how much more will he provide for you?
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
I'm Hank Weinblum with your word of the week. Congressman Andy Biggs arguing against holding Attorney General Barr in contempt.
We put a sword of Damocles over William Barr. We created a Hobson choice.
Okay, first, so Damocles, according to ancient Greek legend, was sucking up to the king, saying he was lucky to have so much power. The king had Damocles sit on his throne, but had a sword put over his head, held in place by a single horsehair, to demonstrate that people in power are in constant danger.
We created a Hobson choice. We said, guess what, Mr. Barr? You either get held in contempt or you violate federal law.
English merchant Thomas Hobson rented out horses, the zip car of his time. He supposedly told customers, you can have that horse over there near the door or no horse at all. Hobson's choice really is no choice. Take it or leave it. Galloping off with sword in hand and your word of the week, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I stand by that statement. He and I agreed on some key issues in the Obama administration. We disagreed significantly on Afghanistan and some other issues. I think that the vice president had some issues with the military, so how he would get along with the senior military and what that relationship would be, I think it would depend on the personalities at the time.
Wow. That's Obama's defense secretary standing by, blasting Joe Biden as wrong. Obviously, clear-thinking individuals would find Joe Biden to be problematic as a presidential candidate. And partially because of the sniffing of the women and the grabbing and the inappropriate contact, but also because he just doesn't make any sense, guys. He says crazy stuff all the time. Not a little of the time. Most of the time. So my hope is that we would see Americans reject his candidacy writ large. It would be fantastic to see the Democrats have someone serious, but none of their candidates can be taken seriously based on the positions that they're currently holding. So, check out the posts. I just put one up over on Facebook about that Clarion Project and the jihad training camps here in the U.S. Now, I want to get to this story about the generic drug makers accused of price fixing in 44 states. Now, again, I am not into price controls. I think that the free market should reign, but this is not a free market if you have companies colluding together to control prices and to subvert the generic market. So a majority of U.S. states have filed a lawsuit that accuses 20 drug companies of orchestrating a sweeping scheme to inflate drug prices and stifle competition for generic drugs. Now, this is according to state prosecutors who filed their case on May 11th. Soaring drug prices from both branded and generic manufacturers have sparked outrage and investigations. The 20 companies engaged in the illegal conspiracies to divide up the market for drugs to avoid competing, and in some cases, they conspired to either prevent prices from dropping or to raise them. Now, this complaint has been filed in U.S. District Court in Connecticut, and a representative of Teva USA, the company alleged to be at the center of the conspiracy, has said they will fight the lawsuit. The allegations in this new complaint and in the litigation more generally are just that, allegations, and that's according to their statement. The lawsuit spans 500 pages, and it accuses the generic drug industry, which mainly sells medicines that are off patent and should be less expensive, of a long history of discrete agreements to ensure that companies that are supposed to be competitors actually get a fair share of the business. The situation worsened in 2012. They were dissatisfied with the status quo of fair share and the mere avoidance of price erosions. And at that point, Teva and their co-conspirators embarked on one of the most egregious and damaging price-fixing conspiracies in the history of the United States. And this is according to the complaint. They colluded to significantly raise prices on 86 medicines between July 2013 and January of 2015. Now, I know if you're like our family, you go to the pharmacy and you're like, okay, here's our prescription. And then you show back up later to pick it up. And that's when the pharmacist kind of looks at you from underneath their eyelashes or kind of looks at you sideways and says, did you know that your in-network rate for this is $668? And you're like, what? That's what happens. It happens at the Walgreens, the CVS, the grocery store pharmacy, wherever you might be. You hear people going, what did you say? Because they're like, why would this drug be $600 and some dollars? This is something we're going to need every month for a while. What? So this price fixing, according to the lawsuit, was on drugs that included everything from tablets, capsules, creams, ointments, diabetes medications, high cholesterol drugs, high blood pressure, cancer, epilepsy, treatments for that. In some instances, the coordinated price increases were more than 1,000%. Now, if you think about things you might have bought, from your pharmacy that were prescription medications between 2013 and 2015, if any one of those drugs sticks out to you in pricing and they're in one of those categories, again, diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, cancer, epilepsy, then you might have been a part of this, unwittingly you were paying more because of this price fixing. The lawsuit also names 15 individuals as defendants, and the defendants are alleged to have carried out these schemes on a day-to-day basis, knowingly fixing the prices of these drugs. So Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak issued a statement. The level of corporate greed alleged in this multi-state lawsuit is heartless and unconscionable. The lawsuit seeks damages, civil penalties, and actions by the court to restore competition to the generic drug market. Now, generic drugs were one of the few bargains in the U.S. healthcare system, but prices for hundreds of generic drugs have risen, some even skyrocketing without explanation, sparking outrage from politicians, payers, and consumers across the country whose costs have doubled, tripled, or even increased by 1,000% or more. So this is fascinating. I'm hoping to see a resolution there, that we're not going to, people aren't going to have to pay these prices any longer. And hopefully there'll be, just go back to the regular free market system in the price fixing. I don't think Americans are saying it has to be $5, for a whole bottle of pills or that people aren't willing to pay. It's that kind of price fixing is literally pricing some people out of being able to get the drugs that they need. How is that fair? Well, life isn't fair, and fair may be an inequitable term to use in this instance. So now we don't have a ton of I want to talk about this story. To be honest with you, I want to talk about this story, but it's such a disgusting story. I'll just put these are two stories that were breaking over the weekend, and I'll just sum them up quickly so that we will have covered them and we can get it out of the way. First of all, the drag queen who was on Twitter, and Chips Ahoy partnered with this drag queen and issued a statement for Mother's Day where he says, buy some cookies and celebrate mothers, pseudo-mothers, people who act like mothers, etc. And I guess my question is one that I had a quick meeting with a friend earlier this morning. We had some coffee and breakfast and went over a whole bunch of stuff. And she asked me if I'd seen the story. And I said, I didn't see it over the weekend. I actually saw it first thing this morning, Monday, after the fact. And there's this huge backlash. And the backlash is because Chips Ahoy sells machine cookies. So let me explain what I mean by machine cookies. So growing up with my mom, she did not have an appreciation for cookies that came in a package. She said they weren't real cookies, they were machine cookies. And so me and my sister, we didn't have Chips Ahoy cookies or pecan sandies or anything like that in our lunches, or we didn't eat them at home. We didn't eat ding dongs and ho-hos and those kinds of prepackaged cupcakes. My mom did not believe in those. She had a cookie recipe that was simple, that she could whip up a batch of cookies using the ingredients from the time she poured the flour out and mixed everything up to you putting a cookie in your mouth, 20 minutes. And this is before take and bake. So this is the way I grew up. This was our household. She didn't believe in going to the store and buying a package of cookies that crunch like a cracker when you bit into them, and that was anything good. Now, if you're out there and you love them, this isn't judgment on you. I'm just telling you how it went. So we're not really a machine cookie household, except my husband likes Oreos, and the kids eat Oreos sometimes too. That being said, the majority of the consumers of Chips Ahoy are families, and they're families with moms in them, because drag queens can't actually give birth. Now, I know there's some man out there who got pregnant and had a baby, but only reason he has a uterus is because he is genetically still a woman. And that's the only way he got that uterus, is because he's a woman. He just lives as a man. But drag queens aren't even pretending that they're transgender or that they want to be the opposite sex. They just dress up as a spectacle. It's a sickness, but again, these are people who don't represent womanhood. When you think of a mom, I actually think of this sweet lady I saw today at the place where I went to go get coffee, and she had 2 tiny little children with her, and they were taking turns crying about all the different cookies and snacks that were within eyeball range of their little short selves. And it was just nothing cuter than them taking turns crying about wanting a cookie, wanting something sweet. And she was dealing with them expertly. Like, she was minimizing the crying, and she was explained to them that they had something in the car they could have, and all they had to do was get through the line. And I just was thinking, she even at one point, she said something to me, and I just said, I just remember when my kids were all that short and small and sweet, and they were the same way when we would be in the store asking for stuff, and you're doing a good job. And she said, how old are your kids now? And I was like, 19, 18, 15. And she said, how do you feel? I said, I feel great, but I miss the time when they were that small. And we had a nice laugh about it. And that was a mom, I'm a mom. If you're listening to this show and you're a mom, you are not well represented by a drag queen. And so it is just so interesting to see these companies. They don't have to weigh in with the drag queen thing. Drag queens are not a significant portion of their customer base, not even a significant portion of the population. They're loudest, they're the most visible, but they're not the largest percentage-wise. They're not even a significant percentage. So why would you take your business that's based on families and jeopardize it by catering to a tiny minority that is offensive to your primary customer base? No, I don't find drag queens offensive just walking around thinking, ooh, drag queens are... No, I don't. I'm talking about when you take a drag queen and say, the way to sell my product is to market it to women by representing them with a drag queen. There's nothing fun or funny about that. That is a man masquerading around with 8 pounds of makeup on his face as a woman, as opposed to an actual woman who bears children, cares for a family. Maybe you don't have children. Doesn't mean you're not a woman. It's just not an accurate representation. And I don't understand why the companies keep doing this, alienating millions of people. I just talked about this, I guess, last week when we were talking about the magazine that sent over the transgendered man in a dress. And I turned the page, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, so these clothes aren't marketed to me. And I'm just never buying anything from there. Again, it just doesn't make any sense for me to, because I'm not a man. So I wanted to cover that story because I'm not understanding why these companies are doing this. And then the other one is Alyssa Milano. Now, if you missed it, she's saying that people should forego intimate relationships with their significant others in order to force men to get angry enough to go down to Georgia and force Georgia to repeal the heartbeat bill. She says if men don't do that, women won't have access to abortions if they wait too long to decide to have one. Now, this is nonsensical, okay? And I think it highlights one of the things that leftist women believe about intimate relations, and that is that it's a transaction. So for every liberal woman out there who says, I'm a part of the Me Too movement, and I think men should see women as people and not for our individual body parts, but then they're a part of Alyssa Milano's strike, admitting that they see themselves as tools for the political party to achieve an agenda, using their bodies as the tool. I cannot believe how tone deaf and completely unaware Alyssa Milano and her followers are. They're actually making the case for misogynists and sexists around the world that women are no more than what they can do for a man. No brains, no intellect, no skills, no talents, no gifts, no managerial skills, no organizational skills, no contributory value whatsoever other than what a woman can do in an intimate relationship for a man. That is what she is saying. The only way to motivate a man to do something for you is to use your body. Don't argue the case. Don't put out facts. Don't put out information. Just use your body. And that is the Democratic agenda. Boiling every person down to the sum of their parts and ordering them to use themselves like tools instead of respecting what God has created. You are made in the image of Christ. If you're listening to this program, young single woman, preserve your womanhood for the marriage bed. Do not use it to influence a man to do one thing or another. You are not a tool. You are a gift from God. You are valuable, and you are more than the intimate relations that any man may want to have with you. Reject this premise. Alyssa Milano is lost, but you can control your destiny, control your body, save yourself. All right. That's the show, everybody. God bless. Have a fantastic evening. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of